Hello everyone, and welcome to our session today on time tracking and production scheduling with Dynamics 365 Business Central. Joining us today is Mark Hamblin from InsightWorks, and we are excited to have such a fantastic turnout today. Before I pass it over to Mark to cover on this hot topic, I would like to remind you that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to our on-demand webinar library later this week for you to review and share with anyone. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to type those into the questions box. We will get them answered during our Q&A time at the end of our session. And now I will pass it on to Mark to kick off our presentation.
Great, thanks. Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Well, I guess it's morning for everybody probably, but what we'll be doing today is going through and talking a little bit about how to improve your shop floor data collection and other aspects of managing your production environment. I'm going to go through a little bit of a PowerPoint here, and then we'll jump right into the software itself. And again, feel free to enter any questions you have in the questions box, and we'll answer them at the end. So a little bit about InsightWorks. So you know Innovia, of course. If you don't know who we are, we're based in Western Canada. We create software for Business Central and Dynamics Nav, so it doesn't really matter what version you're running, we can probably help you out. We have offices in 3 countries, Canada, the US, and Europe as well. And of course, we partner with Innovia for doing these types of deployments. So if you have any questions beyond this presentation, or if you need any help or quotes or anything like that, feel free to contact your friends at Innovia. Now, a little bit about why shop floor insight or really managing your time on the shop floor. And chances are, if you're on this webinar, you already know the answers to all of this. But really what we want to do is we want to get timely and accurate information from the shop floor, because it has a big impact on the rest of the business, right? Accurate time helps with your production costing capability, so you know exactly what things are costing you. You're not just estimating the cost of the product. Your productivity management, how long it's taking to do things, who's working, who's idle, all of those sorts of things come back from getting real, accurate and more real-time data from the shop. Scheduling, of course, that's obvious. If you have the ability to schedule product and see how long it actually took and what the status of that product is, that's quite important. We do also manage quality, and quality is more than just being able to capture things like what was the ID and OD and that type of thing. It's also, if I've got a lot of warranty claims coming back, who actually worked on that product. Being able to have that traceability, not just for materials, but also for labor, right? So that whole quality aspect of warranty and traceability aspect comes into play. Customer satisfaction is sometimes overlooked. Having that real-time information coming from the shop floor allows my sales reps to give people realistic delivery dates, up-to-date information on where their project is, those types of things. And if you're making to stock, you can go in and you can see what's in progress in the shop floor and when it's going to be done, and provide more realistic dates for when it's actually going to be in stock. And finally, of course, payroll, being able to manage employees' time, prevent overpayments, prevent underpayments, manage the overtime better, those types of things. So all of these things, come into play and more when we're dealing with that shop floor data. So really it has a big impact on almost the entire rest of the organization. So it's very important that you manage it appropriately. So what we do to allow you to do that is we have the tool called Shop Floor Insight, and it does all of these things, or these are some of the capabilities that are available in the product. And I'm not going to talk in the demo, I'm not going to talk too much about the time and attendance and payroll things, so I'll mention it here in a little more detail. What we can do is we have a time clock interface, so if you have a punch clock or something like that out on the shop today, we can replace that if you want. And people can come up and they can punch in using a barcode or facial recognition, or we can tie it into access cards or whatever you might have. But typically it's barcodes or facial recognition. And people will punch in, we'll take a photo of who punched in, that sort of thing. And, from the time they punch in until they get their pay stub 2 weeks later, nobody's having to manipulate that data, because we're doing the overtime calculations, and we can plug in pretty much any sort of custom calculation you want, but we do basic overtime and double time calculations. We integrate that with your payroll system, so we can generate a file for your payroll system, or if you're running payroll within Nav, we can just feed it directly in there. And we do things like shift scheduling and other sort of time and attendance or labor management capabilities within the system. But the big one that we'll be talking about today is the barcoded labor collection. We want to use barcodes because they're an efficient and largely error-free way of capturing information. We also have the ability to allow people to manually enter time, right? You can type in a job number or production order number and enter how much time you spent on it. The system has that capability as well, but it's a lot more error prone. People can type in the wrong job, the wrong hours, those sorts of things. So really we prefer to go barcoded labor collection. The manual stuff is useful if you don't have paper on the shop floor. So if you want to be a paperless facility, then doing the manual with a touch screen or something like that might make sense. So I'll show you a little bit of both of those, but really the barcodes is where it's at. A few other things. One that's also sometimes underappreciated is the safety logbook capability. So if you're running your safety program, you have boxes of paper filed in a safety office somewhere. If you're running on an Excel, that can be replaced with a safety logbook, track incidents, lost time injuries, hazard assessments, fire drills, whatever you want within the system. Okay. And then the last thing I'll mention on this screen is, the graphical dispatch and scheduler. We'll go through that. Gives the ability to see the shop in a more graphical manner. All right. The other key capability with Shop Floor Insight, to segue from that graphical scheduler piece, is the ability to integrate with another one of our products called MXAPS. And MXAPS is what we call a finite capacity scheduler or advanced planning and scheduling system. And what it allows you to do is generate your production schedule automatically. So what it will do is it'll figure out, what you have in the shop today, what your current capacities are, what your labor requirements are, what your material requirements are, all of those sorts of things, and generate a schedule that you can actually execute. And if you have, changeover times or setup times, we can eliminate those. We can do all sorts of things to generate a schedule that's realistic and, make sure that you deliver on time. This is a separate product, so you can do Shop Floor Insight independently first and rely on, the schedule that Nav or Business Central generates for you. Taking one step up, you can go to the advanced planning and scheduling, which will go ahead, integrate with Nav or BC, generate that schedule for you automatically, and then you use Shop Floor Insight to execute that schedule. Okay, so just so you know, when we're talking about scheduling and Shop Floor Insight, we're using the schedule that Nav or Business Central has generated, and we can manipulate it. If you want something more advanced, which does all that scheduling work for you, then something like an MXAPS might make sense. All right, now that's the software. When you're looking at a project like this, there's really a few aspects from a cost perspective that you need to look at. So the software implementation, hardware, and the software, as far as Shop Floor Insight, is licensed by the number of employees. So if you have 20 welders out there or 10 machinists, those count as employees and they would need a license. Now that's not a Nav license or a Business Central license, that's a license for Shop Floor Insight. The licensing for that Microsoft wants from you for Business Central or Nav is going to be either a device license or a limited license. So again, Innovia can help you work out what that cost might be, but really you're licensing it at the terminal level. So if you have 10 terminals out there that people use to record their time or quality or whatever, you would need 10 Microsoft licenses, but those are much lower cost than what you would consider a standard Business Central or Nav license. The implementation, often it's fixed price, but again, you would talk with Innovia and we can come up with a quote on implementation for you. And last thing is the hardware. So the way this typically works is you have fixed terminals out on the shop floor. In other words, you'll mount a Windows PC or a touch screen or something out there that people will go to actually scan their time in or enter their time. You could also have tablets mounted at every machine, or a Chromebook or something like that at each machine if you wanted. But if you go with the fixed terminals, typically it's commodity hardware, right? Like it's a consumer grade monitor, hooked up to a thin client, or if you have an old Windows 7 PC or something like that you want to throw out there, you can do that. And there's nothing special with the hardware. All right. Now I'll show you a little bit more on the hardware here in a moment, but The options, again, standard PCs. Chrome boxes were fairly popular. They've gone up a bit in price, but these are, they've got no moving parts. You slap them out on the shop floor, you can cover them in dust, they'll keep working. You hook them up to a normal monitor, and away you go. Stick PCs, industrial touchscreens. So if you're in foods or something like that where you need to wash down the facility, then an industrial touchscreen might make sense, or just a consumer grade tablet. If you get a 10-inch tablet that you want to mount it at every machine, you could use that as well if you really wanted. All right. So some examples. This guy here, that's the Chromebook box, and it's about 4 inches square and 1.5 inches tall. Again, you slap it onto a monitor and away you go. Stick PC, that's about the size of a TV remote control, and you hook it up to a monitor and you've got a full, Windows 10 PC running, and you can, run the software. A little bit, here's a real life example of that, of a terminal. So this one is, at the time this picture was taken, was probably about 12 years old. This particular company has mounted it in a little case they fabbed up, but it's a thin client terminal. So again, no moving parts, hooked up to a standard, old Dell monitor, and that's what they use. This barcode sheet that's here, we'll talk about barcodes in just a sec, but this is for things that are standard. So this might be a list of assets and a list of activity codes and work centers, things like that, things that aren't going to change, that are sort of close to where this terminal might be stationed. So we'll talk about those barcodes in a sec, but somebody could walk up here and scan that they're going on break, or scan that they're doing cleanup or something along those lines. Now, a little bit on so that's all the costing. I didn't give you actual numbers, but again, talk to Innovia, they'll help you out. Once you've got those numbers on the website, if you go to dmsiworks.com, you will find an ROI calculator where you can plug in numbers related to your facility, plug in what you think the cost is going to be, and it's going to spit out a return on investment payback period. So the 6,500 here, ignore that, that's not an actual quote or anything, but you would plug in what you think the system is going to cost, and it's going to tell you, how long it thinks it's going to take you to pay that back. And typically what we see is less than 12 months. Often we see, less than 6 months or even less, depending on how much it impacts your payroll. If you go online, there's a bunch of ROI calculators for doing automated time and attendance, and those tend to show, several months worth of payback period. So if you incorporate that, I mean, this thing pays for itself very, very quickly. We also have an Excel-based version if you want to fill it in and pass it around. We've got that as well if you want to get a copy of it. Now, finally, we're getting close to the interesting stuff rather than me just talking. Well, you'll still have to listen to me talking, but at least you'll have something nicer to look at. The barcodes. So these are the barcodes I'll be scanning. So we're about to jump into the demo, and I'll be scanning these barcodes. And this one here is the employee badge. So typically this will get printed out in Business Central, and often people will print this on pre-perforated, Avery label stock or card stock, and you'll take that out and put it in a clip-on badge holder or something along those lines. And really all we care about is the barcode here. That's what I'll be scanning to make things go. But we also have a kit, I think it's a couple $1,000, that you can print real ID cards on, plastic badges with employee photo and all of those sorts of things. You can print whatever you like. That's just a report that comes out of Nav or Business Central. And again, what we care about is the barcode. So if you have existing badges, you can just stick a barcode on an existing badge if you like. But this is what the employee is going to use to identify themselves to the system. With the time and attendance, again, we have the ability to do facial recognition for that time and attendance portion, or they can scan a badge and we can take a photo of them when they scan their badge. Over here on the right-hand side is a shop traveler I'll be using. So this again is printed out of Business Central or Nav, and it's a sample, but a lot of people use it, out of the box as is. And this gives me barcodes to scan for every activity on that production order. This happens to be a production order. Allows me to scan time against any of these operations. We do work with production orders, jobs, service orders, fixed assets, and non-productive time currently. Okay, but in this case, I can scan either setup or runtime, and these are the barcodes I'll be scanning. Again, if you don't have a traveler or you don't want to have a traveler, we have the ability to do paperless time entry, but for now I'll be scanning these barcodes. All right, so that's a little bit on the system. Let's actually see what this sucker looks like. Well, that's what it looks like. So what you see there is what the employees will see on the shop floor. So this is just running in a web browser, and that's why you can use pretty much any hardware you want. The latest iOS devices like an iPad, the Safari browser doesn't quite cut it yet, but if you're running an Android tablet or Windows tablet or any sort of Chromebox or anything that runs a newer version of a browser, they'll get this display. So again, what you'll have is you'll have these fixed terminals that live out on the shop floor, ideally close to the work centers, maybe one per work center, something like that. And this interface is going to show up here. And what the employee is going to do when they start work, they've clocked in for the morning, and they're going to walk up to this terminal, and they're going to indicate what they're about to start working on. So for me, I walk up, I scan my badge, and it shows me my time card for the day. Now, I haven't done anything yet, so my time card is blank. In this view, you have a lot of options. So you can change the view, like what's displayed here, and even what view is shown. We'll talk about these things up in a bit, but you can just change that based on the employee, based on the terminal they scan into, or the employee group. Okay, so for example, if I scanned in at a drilling workstation, I could get a completely different view than if I scan in at a welding workstation, as an example, or an assembly workstation or something like that. Now, in this case, though, I scan my badge, it shows me my time card for the day, and the next thing I do is I simply scan the activity I'm working on. So I scan a single barcode there, and that barcode happened to relate to this production order and this specific operation. So it brings up that production order, the operation, production order line, everything else, a bunch of other stuff I'll talk about in a moment, but that's it. So to start tracking my time, what I did was I identified myself, I scanned my badge, I scanned the activity I'm working on, and then I walk off and I do my work. If I want, I can scan my badge again to lock the terminal so nobody else sees my time card, and then I go off and I do my work. So that's about as simple as you can get, right? Everything you do in the system is really two beeps. I beep my badge, beep the activity I'm working on, and then I go do my thing, all right? If you have dedicated terminals, you don't even need to scan your badge. I could scan my badge first thing in the morning, and you could set the time out to be 8 hours, and then that terminal just stays unlocked all day, and then all I'm doing is scanning the barcodes of the activities that I'm working with. But in this particular case, what I did again, scan my badge, I scanned what I was working on, I went off, I did my work, let's say it's an hour later, I come back, scan my badge again, oops, got to scan my right badge, scan my badge again, and it unlocks the terminal again, shows me my time card. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan the next activity I'm working on. And in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan what we call a non-productive code. So these are activity codes that you can define. You can have as many as you like, and they can be things like, here I've got sweeping, but it can be first aid if there's an incident on the shop floor that you want to tie back into that safety logbook I talked about. It could be things like waiting for work or, toolbox meeting or whatever type of activity you want to track. And of course, you don't have to go down to this level of detail if you don't want. But if you do actually want to figure out what your employees are doing on the shop floor when they're not actually working on productive stuff, this is a nice, quick and easy way to do it because again, it's one beep and I'm done. Now, when I did that, when I scanned this next activity, what it did was it actually clocked me off the first activity and calculated that elapsed time. Now that happens to be in hours, but on a work center basis or an employee basis, you can change that to minutes or days or whatever the heck you want. But in this particular case, it was hours. You have the option, like I have here, where I could come in and enter that time manually as well. So you can turn that on or off. But where that's useful is if maybe you don't have the most diligent workforce and they forget to clock in and clock out all the time, you can allow them to edit their time themselves. Or maybe you just want them, they're working on one or two things during the day. At the end of the day, they can scan what they worked on and manually type in how many hours they spent on each one, something like that. Typically, that's turned off where you can't edit that, and then the supervisor is the only person that can change that time. The other thing that I often get questions on at this point, hopefully you haven't typed any out yet, but is can I have an employee clocked into multiple activities at the same time? And the answer is yes. So for example, if I have one operator running two machines, they can be clocked into both simultaneously. okay, and they can clock in and out of each of those independently. And that also gives us the ability to capture labor time independently of machine time. So if I spend, half an hour setting something up and then it runs unattended for 4 hours until I come back and offload it, we can track that 4 hours of runtime completely independently of the labor time that that person is doing something else with. And of course, that helps for costing and machine utilization reporting and all those sorts of things. Now, and then the last thing we can do with this is batching. So batching would allow me, here where I scan the production order, then I scan a second activity, it clocked me out. I could scan, let's say, 10 production orders in, all in a row. And that would be useful if I have like a paint booth or a powder coating oven or something along those lines, or a sawing work center, whatever. Anything where I'm doing multiple production orders essentially simultaneously, I can scan in those 10 production orders or whatever it is, run it for an hour or two, and then clock off that batch, and it'll split that time proportionally across all of those production orders. Okay, so it makes it very easy to capture time across multiple production orders, right? I wouldn't want to scan in and out of each production order in that batch if I had to. Now, that's the basics of scanning barcodes to enter time. Again, all I do is I walk up, I scan my badge, it unlocks the terminal, and then I scan the activity that I'm working on, and that's all I do. So in this case, I scanned a job. This one up here was a production order, here's a job, and you can see it's basically the same concept. If you want to go more paperless, or if you want to provide additional information to the people on the shop floor, another option is the dispatch list. So if I come in, I'm just actually going to scan somebody else's employee badge here. And when I do that, it just switches to a different employee. So now we're in here as Linda. And Linda doesn't see her time card when she clocks in. What she sees is a dispatch list. So we're actually on the production dispatch list. And what that gives her is typically it's going to be filtered to one work center. So for example, maybe she's at the chain assembly work center. And you'd set up that filter within Nav or Business Central. And this is all she'd see. She'd only see the work that's coming up at her particular work center for whatever time range you specify. So she scans her badge and she sees all the work that's coming up at her station for the next couple hours or next day or whatever it happens to be. Okay. And one point to make there, by the way, I said, you set that filter up in Nav or Business Central. This is tied directly to Nav or Business Central. This isn't a separate product that runs on a separate database or anything like that. Everything I do here is real time with Nav or Business Central. If I make a change in there, it'll show up on the screen and vice versa. So for example, if, on those production orders that I scanned in, if I went into Nav at this point or Business Central, I could look up that production order. I could see exactly who's clocked into it, how much elapsed time has occurred on the shop floor, all of those sorts of things. It's all real time. Okay. Anyway, back to the dispatch list. So the dispatch list is nice because now I don't necessarily have to scan a barcode to start an activity. So for example, Linda here comes in and she sees, okay, well, I'm going to start on this activity. She can click on that if you have mouse and keyboard, or ideally you have a touch screen like a tablet. She taps on that and then can tap clock on. Now for touch screens, this view might be a little small, especially if you have big fingers out in the shop, but because it's a browser, all we do is zoom in a little, and now we have a very touch-friendly interface. Nice big areas to tap on. You can tap clock on, and you can start that work exactly as if I had scanned the barcode. So the way we set it up is we allow employees to type in their name. If you don't want to have them scan a barcode badge, they can use the dispatch list to select what they're working on, and they can clock in directly from the dispatch list, and they don't need to scan a barcode. Again, the barcodes are ideal because it's way harder to make a mistake with a barcode, and it's much quicker than having to come in here and search for a specific production order or operation or anything like that. We just scan a barcode and away we go. All right, so that's sort of the tabular dispatch list, again, where you can filter it, you can within Nav, you can sort it out here. You can do all sorts of things to identify what that employee needs to work on. The other approach we have is we have the ability to do in a more graphical manner. So with the schedule thing, what that allows us to do is show that same dispatch list in a schedule view, in a graphical view. So this is also a dispatch list. If I'm working at Work Center 100 here, here's all the work that's coming up in my work center for the next day or week or whatever time frame and zoom level you specify, I can come in here and see all the work that's coming up at my particular work center. And again, this is ideal for a touch screen. If you're running on a tablet or industrial touch screen, we would, typically zoom in, and you've got a nice big area to tap. So I can tap on this. I can see exactly what I need to do there. If it's assigned to anybody, all of those sorts of things. And I can hit clock on, and I can clock on to that activity. Now, it's more than just, showing blocks of time in Graphical. You can change colors. So if something's late, you can set up a filter that turns it red, or if it hasn't started yet, it could be blue, and if it's running, it could be green, whatever you want it to do. The way I've got it set up, if I tap on this particular operation, it highlights all the related operations in green. So I can see everything that's related to this activity here. Or if I want to filter, do that searching, I can come up here and just say 005, and it'll filter down to show me anything with that number in it. Or if I just want to see anything that's, got chain assembly in it or whatever, I can see that as well. Okay, so that's, gives us the ability to come in here, do a quick filter, find what we're looking for. Beyond this, I haven't talked about this yet, but when I tap on this, I can get all the same information that I would get from a dispatch list, or if I'd actually clocked into this activity. So it's more than just, the schedule view. I've got all of this other stuff I can do related to this activity that I've tapped on here. I'm going to hide these again. So again, what I can do as an operator out in the shop, I can come in here. It can be filtered to just my work center. I can see all the work that's coming up for me. I can tap on a specific activity, tap clock on, and away I go. I've now started that activity. As a supervisor or a planner, I can also use this, if I have the appropriate permissions, to decide how I'm going to execute this particular work. So for example, let's say I come in here and I say, you know what, it's Friday, but we're never going to be able to do this work on Monday here, and this work center is down. I'm actually going to take this and I'm going to drag and drop it, and I'm going to stick it here on Tuesday. And as soon as I do that, the system will reschedule everything around there for me. So I didn't have capacity on Tuesday. It said as soon as you can do it is Wednesday, and it rescheduled all those activities around there. So you can use it to do drag and drop scheduling, and then, sort of move things around to adjust your schedule as needed in the shop floor. Now, it's intended typically for reactive type scheduling. I walk in on Monday morning and equipment is down or people are missing. I can drag and drop and move that schedule around so that now the operators, when they come in, they can see exactly what's happening. Okay, so that's the graphical dispatch list. So really, to reiterate, we've got the ability to just scan a barcode to start an activity. We've got the ability to use the tabular dispatch list to come in here and search and find an activity to clock on. And we have the ability to use the graphical dispatch list to see things a little more graphically to clock on to that activity. All right. Yeah, hopefully there's, if you have any questions, again, feel free to enter them in the question box. We'll get to them at the end. I'm going to go back now and talk about some of the things that around the time entry. So I'm going to scan my badge again here. Okay, and what it does is it flips over to my time card. I'm also going to zoom out so that we have a little more screen real estate here. And I'm going to scan a production order barcode here. Let me just find a good one that might be useful. All right, so I brought up this particular production order. And what we've got is we have on the line, you can turn this on or off, but we have the ability to record output and scrap and a scrap reason code for intermediate operations. So if you're tracking piece counts at specific work centers, or you just want to track, the quantity complete from a scheduling perspective, they can just enter how many they've complete as they're doing the work. We can also do finished goods output. So using this button up here, I can come in and record my finished goods completion. I can record any lot numbers or serial numbers I might be producing. So for example, if you have serial number tags that you attach, pre-printed tags, I could record which serial numbers I assigned, those types of things. At this point, we can also do quality inspections. So I'll talk about quality inspections in a moment, but if you've got a quality inspection assigned to this, we can show that here, and they're forced to enter inspection information when they do the output as well. And finally, if you're using our Warehouse Insight product, which is sort of a mobile warehouse management solution, what that'll allow you to do is also output to pallets at this point. So I'd be able to actually build up pallets while I'm outputting, print labels, do all those sorts of things as well at this point. Okay, so that's the output. Now, the other part of the material side is the consumption. So we can do consumption. We've got the bill of materials displayed here. That can be just informational if you like, but we can do point of use consumption. And what that means is I can come in and record, exactly what I've used. And this is especially useful if you have, lot numbers or serial numbers that you want to record at time of use. So somebody's got, a pile of things with a lot number or serial number on it. They grab one, they want to scan that barcode or manually enter the lot number or serial number that they've consumed. This is also useful for scrap reporting. So even if you're doing back flushing, I might want to record that I've scrapped 2 or 3 of these, and I can come in here and enter that and enter a scrap code, and we can record that additional consumption if there happen to be any scrap. Okay? And then I can register this, and then that of course goes into Nav or Business Central, and you've identified what you've consumed on that production order at that specific operation. Below that, we've got the work instructions. So again, that's sort of output and consumption. So we handle that material movement. Underneath this, we've got the work instructions. The work instructions can be for a specific operation, or it can be for the order as a whole, or it can be customer specific instructions. So maybe that comes from a sales order or whatever. And again, these you just enter directly into Nav or Business Central. They can be routing comments, or they can be production order comments, whatever you like, and they show up here. You can also extend this to show all sorts of things. We often put statistics in here, like total elapsed time and all sorts of things that you may want to report on for this particular operation or production order. Okay, so that's the work instructions. Now, if work instructions aren't enough, we're saying use jig X or tool Y or whatever it happens to be, you may not have enough room in here to put everything you want to convey. So we do have the ability to show linked documents as well. And these linked documents can come from the item, or they can come from the production order itself. So things like an assembly diagram might be linked to the item, and then it's available here in the shop floor, and an employee can open that up and view the diagram. You can put Excel spreadsheets in here for quality or whatever the heck you want to do and link it. We can do the item picture too, but that may or may not be useful to you. We can also show tooling. Tooling is really just informational in Business Central or Nav, unless you're using something like MXAPS, which can actually constrain based on tooling, so prevent you from trying to use the same tool more than once. And the last thing is the quality inspections that I'll talk about on this interface here. So the quality inspections gives you the ability to create an inspection checklist within Nav or Business Central. And that's basically a template. So you can have as many of these inspections as you like per product, per work center, or any combination of that. And then you assign those inspections to, again, the work center or the operation or the product or whatever you want to do. And the employees on the shop floor have the ability to record the results of those inspections. You can also have a QC person running around with a tablet doing the same thing. And as I mentioned in the output screen, when you do output, you can force people to enter those quality inspection results. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I've created one, I just called it, generic, and it's got a bunch of different data types here just for illustration purposes. Normally these would be things like inner diameter, outer diameter, length, wattage, color, whatever the heck you want to, inspect for that product or work center or whatever it happens to be. So again, you can have, at an assembly work center, you could have a very different inspection for that product than you have at, the shipping work center or the, cutting work center or whatever it happens to be. But in here, again, you can just enter all of this information. You can have drop-down lists. You can have all that kind of stuff. You can have tolerances. So here I've just got an integer tolerance where, if it's between 3 and 5, it's a pass. I entered 7 here, so it indicates it's a fail. But if it was, a 5, that would be a pass. And we store all of this quality inspection information in Nav or Business Central. And you can report on it. So a lot of people are doing Power BI reports or job reporting to sort of evaluate what the failure rate is at specific work centers, or specific products, and those types of things. At minimum, you have the ability to track the results of those quality inspections within the system by lot number and serial number, if you like, as well, and store them for reporting purposes. Okay. All right. So that's really a good look at the shop floor interface. I'll briefly show you a little bit on reporting, but before I do that, I'm going to show you one more aspect of how we capture time. And this is important because it's rework. So within Nav or Business Central, there's lots of ways you can deal with rework. The rework I'm talking about here specifically is in process rework. In other words, something has gone wrong. I was working on this wheel assembly. I sent it off to the next operation, and they just brought it back to me to fix because something was wrong with it. There's other ways, like, let's say it gets 3 or 4 down and you have to redo a whole bunch of operations. You might want to start another production order, those sorts of things. That's handled as well. Just want to be clear, this isn't the only way to do rework, but this is very useful in that in-process rework. So again, what happened here, I've done this wheel assembly once already. I sent it off to the next stage. It came back to me to rework because something went wrong with it. So again, I scan into that activity because I need to record my time against that wheel assembly, but I want to flag this time that I'm spending as something exceptional. It's not normal time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan a barcode to indicate why I'm doing this work a second time. And I'm going to, in this case, blame engineering. So what I did was I scanned a barcode and it says rework engineering. So my root cause here is engineering, which means that now I can do reporting and I can find out, on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, what were all the root causes of my rework? Was it engineering? Was it sales? Was it manufacturing or material defect, or machine downtime, or whatever? And then I can report on those root causes of rework. And that's very important because sometimes that's very hard to track in the shop. And this makes it very easy because, they want to blame somebody else for the extra work that they're doing. And rework is very expensive, right? If I spend an hour doing this, that means that's costing you at least 3 hours of time. The hour it took me to do it the first time, the hour to rework it, the lost, opportunity cost for that hour I could have been doing something more productive, plus all the QC time and everything else that goes into it. So being able to identify what's causing that rework is very important. Okay. Anyway, enough on rework. I harp on that a lot, but it is a very expensive issue within shops, and being able to capture that easily, that could pay for the system itself right there. All right, now once you've got all this time in, of course, there's an approval phase where you can go in and the supervisors can approve the time. That's optional. Goes through payroll, all of those sorts of things. I'm not going to get into that today. But again, if you have questions about that, feel free to ask, or we could do another specific discussion with you on the other aspects of it. But we do have supervisory level approval where they can go and approve the time, adjust it, do whatever they need. It's fairly quick and easily for them to do that. And then finally, once that's all done, of course, we have the ability to report on all this information. So we do have a JET report. This is JET Express, so it's the free version of JET. That you can run all these reports in Excel, but you can build whatever reports you like. It's actually very easy to report out of the system. Most of the data is in one table, so you can pull that into Power BI or into Excel or JET or whatever reporting tool you want to use and report on whatever you like. Now we've built a few here just as sort of the basics, like productivity, by employee or production order or job, and time range. We get to see productive versus non-productive time. Hours by activity code. This is a good one if you have that rework broken out into multiple root causes, because I'd see a chart like this, and what I'd see is the number of hours for each type of rework. So if I see maybe this was engineering, I could see, oh yeah, engineering is always the problem. They're always shipping out the wrong drawings to the shop floor or something like that, and you can focus on reducing the rework that way. But this particular one, I don't have rework broken up, but you can see all the time we've spent on the various activities on the shop floor and in pie chart format. And then hours by pay code, if you're using the time and attendance capability, where we can calculate and track overtime and regular time and everything else, this is a nice view. I can see what's going on in the shop. Am I spending a lot of time on overtime or double time or whatever? At this level, we don't really care about the costs. It's more the hours that we're spending on that overtime. So, a supervisor can see in his department, what kind of overtime he's been spending and that sort of thing. Hours by month is actually is actually a nice little report. It's very basic when you look at it. I've got my production orders or jobs down here and the hours I spend on them per month over time. But this is just an Excel pivot table. So first of all, I can filter it down to specific employees or work centers or whatever I want. And it's very flexible. So for example, if I'm in accounting and I want to say, I want to look at machine utilization, how many hours are we actually working at each work center every month? Well, it's really easy on this particular report because it's the pivot table. I just come in here and I say, you know what, instead of seeing it by the document number, in other words, the production order number first, I want to see it based on the work center. So I drop that in here, and now I've got a report that says, hey, for this work center, these are the hours I put on that work center for this year or last year or whatever you want to filter it to. Okay, so it becomes very powerful. Now it's an accounting report for them to help figure out burden or machine utilization or whatever they want to do. Or if I want to see it by employee first, like, hey, how well is Joe working out? Here's all the hours for Joe or Fred or whoever, and I can break that out as well. So anyway, very powerful reporting capabilities within the system. Okay, last thing is, again, just to reiterate, everything is in NAV or Business Central. So this is the NAV Windows client here, and everything we do is real time. So everything I've scanned into the shop floor client, any of that stuff has gone into Business Central or NAV, and this is where I manage everything. This is where I can do approvals, where I can do my payroll management. All of that is directly within Business Central or NAV. And that takes us right about to the 45-minute mark, which was our sort of target time. And I'll pause here to see if there are any questions perhaps that people have.
None have come through yet, Mark, but if anyone does have any, please feel free to go ahead and type those in and we'll get those answered for you.
And I know everybody's shy, so nobody wants to type it in. But again, you don't, and it might be drinking from the fire hose here a little bit, where you've seen a lot of stuff. If you can't think of questions, or if you have to have discussion before you ask those questions, again, feel free to reach out to Innovia. They'll be happy to answer them for you, or get us in touch, and we can, discuss them or answer those questions directly as well. Awesome. Okay, I have nothing else to show today, Angie.
Mark, one question did come through.
Okay.
Is this available for BC SAS? Did you already mention that and we just missed it?
I didn't mention it. It is, well, it will be. So within the month, it'll be available on AppSource for BC SAS. All of our other products, for the most part, are on AppSource today. This one is lagging a little because we're waiting for the Microsoft licensing to firm up around how we could actually license this. But anyway, that's a long answer for a short, long story for a short answer. It will be available within the month on AppSource.
All right. Thank you very much, Mark, for presenting, and to everyone on today's call, or if you're watching on demand, we want to thank you for joining us. And we do have a few more webinars that are coming up soon. On July 16th, we have Desiree Gagir from Innovia Consulting, and she's going to be presenting on how to build your NAV test team. And then on July 18th, we have John Byrne from Innovia Consulting, and he's going to be presenting on upgrades, why they are so expensive when you transition. And also check out our website for more of our upcoming events, and that's innovia.com/events. And we also want to mention that we have our new podcast going on. It's called the Innovia Conversation, if you have not heard of it already. You can find out all about the different podcast platforms to listen to on our podcast page, and that's innovia.com/podcast. So check out our podcast selection and subscribe so you get notified of all of our new episodes. And then we are also proud to be a platinum sponsor of BCUG NAVUG Summit in Orlando, Florida this year, October 13th through the 18th. And if you haven't already registered or want to know more information about Summit, check out our conference page on our website, and that's innovia.com/conferences. And we always have other items that we're posting, so just check that out for our future events. All right, well, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Mark, for the wonderful presentation, and we look forward to seeing you again soon on another Innovia webinar. Have a great day, everyone.